The Duwamish is responsible for generating the wealth of the city. It fueled the growth of the city and the wealth of the city, but at the expense of the survival of this place and its people. We did, in fact, build right into the river channels. We also extracted all of the wealth of this land. How we have treated this river reflects how much we value its people. The Duwamish people have occupied this area for over 10,000 years. Where we're sitting right now was one of their village sites. And that is the only reason why this piece of waterfront and this little river bend behind us here still exists, because archaeological remains of that village were found here.
The communities here are older than the city of Seattle. Georgetown had its city hall before the city of Seattle had a city hall. And South Park was the breadbasket, and that's what started to supply the Pike Place Market that we all know downtown now. And these communities were established well before the straightening of the river.
The lower 5 miles of the river was once about 12 miles of river when it was meandering. Now it's straight and deep. And we did that intentionally in order to create the industrial powerhouse to fuel the growth of the city of Seattle. In straightening and deepening the river, we eliminated 98% of the natural habitat that was here. We threatened the very salmon runs. As the lands became occupied by industry, there was also a lot of uncontrolled industrial pollution that came into the Duwamish. The non-industrial areas of the city, particularly the wealthier areas ringing a beautiful body of water, Lake Washington, began to be worried about pollution there as well, because raw sewage was going into all of the water bodies in the area in the 1950s. So in order to clean up Lake Washington and restore pristine waters and beaches in the wealthier, whiter parts of Seattle, that sewage and much of the storm water over the years has also been rerouted to dump here into the Duwamish instead. Today, there are public beaches. There are also now nice private shoreline beaches and their ability to both fish and swim there. So the cleanup of Lake Washington, which is one of the greatest environmental success stories that is cited in the entire nation, was actually done at the expense of the Duwamish and the people who live here and were fishing here.
There's a bag there. We need a couple of people with the pickers, and we'll pick up the bags. We'll pick up all the trash. So we only need 2 pickers.
When I first moved here, I wanted to live in a neighborhood where people would look like me. I am from Ecuador, and in my childhood, we got to be next to a lot of rivers, and the Amazon River was to me one of my passions. So I came here, and then I learned this is the only river we have in Seattle.
The Duwamish Valley and Rainier Valley, I think, are the 2 most diverse zip codes in the entire nation. And that includes both Native people who have been here for millennia and the people who live along the river today, who are from all around the world. But what they share is their marginalization.
Usually when you have what we call fence line communities, or communities that are affected by contamination, they move into it because the property is cheaper. In this case, it was the industries that moved in and over time bought more property, moved more people out, and that environmental health situation down here deteriorated rapidly.
We kind of have been the community that has been forgotten because we are in the South, majority of people here, people of color.
They are living side by side with industrial pollution, not just from the factories and the contamination of the river, but we also are in between 2 highways. We're under 2 flight paths. So air, water, and land contamination is something that everybody who lives here contends with. People living in the Duwamish Valley have an 8-year shorter life expectancy than the Seattle average. They have a full 13-year shorter life expectancy than people living in the healthiest neighborhoods in Seattle, which of course are much wealthier and also much whiter.
For so many years, we have seen the lack of attention to our neighborhood, and we think it's environmental racism. We also talk about health. We also talk about food. We also talk about access to affordable housing. So we couldn't not see single layered and like, oh, we're gonna just be doing the cleanup. We know that nobody is gonna be protecting us except for ourselves because it's impacting us directly.
The Duwamish was listed as a Superfund site 20 years ago this year. And we are not anticipating that this cleanup will be finished for another at least 20 years. We have been able to clean up half a dozen of the most highly polluted kind of hotspots along the river. And EPA estimates that in doing that, we've removed about half of the load of PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, which are one of the most ubiquitous and toxic of the chemicals in here. They're a cancer-causing chemical. So that's real progress, but it has not made the river safe or healthy for anybody yet, so we still have a long way to go.
There are communities that are fishing and that it's some of them fish for recreation, but we have a very good amount of people that are there because subsistence. There's still a lot of native fishing in there. They have the rights to do so.
We don't want to see one industry have to move because of the cleanup or anything else. Because then where are they going to go? They're going to go someplace else and maybe make it dirty. No, clean your act up here. Be a good neighbor in that sense. We're all connected here. It's not us against them. If we do a little bit of work, all of a sudden this place becomes a great place to come to. It's an asset. We have a salmon run here, a wild salmon run in one of the most populated watersheds in the state of Washington. It's not doing really well right now, but we're working on it. And now we have the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps, and these kids really start to get educated about environmental justice, about stormwater, about all kinds of different things. And they start to learn about how important it is that they're doing this work and start to have a little more pride in their community. I was taught by my grandfather. The salmon and everything else, they're all related to me. That's part of my family. Every year, we're doing something else that helps the river get better.
This series is made possible by the generous support of the Port of Seattle.